Our first story taps into a fear that's all too human. It's not about a ghost or a demon, but about a person whose intentions are terrifyingly unclear. A young woman, we'll call her Alicia, had just moved into her first solo apartment. It was a ground floor unit in a small building, nothing special, but it was hers. The rent was cheap, and it even had a little shared backyard. For the first week, it was perfect. She felt independent, safe, and proud. But that feeling wasn't going to last. It started with a prickling on the back of her neck, that classic feeling that you're being watched. She'd be at her kitchen sink, which faced the backyard, and a sudden wave of unease would wash over her. She'd scan the yard, the trees, the windows across the way. Nothing. She wrote it off as just new home jitters, the kind of paranoia that comes with living alone for the first time. But the feeling didn't go away. It got stronger. Then, one Saturday afternoon, she saw him. An older man just standing in the middle of the yard, staring right at her window. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, motionless. Alicia froze, her heart starting to hammer in her chest. She didn't recognize him as a neighbor. After what felt like an eternity, he turned and walked away. She tried to tell herself it was nothing. Maybe a visitor, maybe he was lost. But her gut was screaming that something was wrong. A few days later, he was back. This time, he was closer to her apartment. When he saw her at the window, he smiled, a big, fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. He waved. Alicia gave a hesitant little wave back, just hoping he'd leave. Instead, he walked right up to her window. He cupped his hands against the glass to peer inside, his face just inches from hers. "Is George home?" he asked, his voice muffled. Alicia's blood went ice cold. She didn't know a George. "You have the wrong apartment," she said, her voice shaking as she yanked the blinds shut. The breaking point came that Friday night. Alicia was watching a movie when she heard a faint scratching at her back door, the one leading to the yard. She muted the TV, her whole body tensing up. The scratching stopped. Then, a soft knock. "Maintenance," a man's voice called out. It was his voice. "Landlord sent me for a leak." "No way." It was almost 11 p.m., and her landlord always gave notice. She peeked through the peephole and saw him standing there, holding a wrench, his eyes darting around nervously. "I don't have a leak," she said through the door, trying to sound steady. "You need to leave, or I'm calling the police." The man's whole attitude shifted. The friendly act vanished. "Just open the door," he ordered, his voice low and menacing. He jiggled the doorknob. Alicia didn't wait. She ran to her bedroom, locked the door, and dialed 911, whispering to the operator that a man was trying to break in. By the time the police got there, he was gone. But not far. They found him in his own apartment, in the same building. He was calm and denied everything, telling the cops he was just being friendly and that she was overreacting. He claimed he was a handyman and got confused about repair requests. With no forced entry and only her word against his, the police said their hands were tied. They told her to call if he trespassed again, but they couldn't arrest him for just being creepy. Alicia didn't sleep that night. The feeling of being watched was constant now. She'd see him in the yard sitting on a lawn chair, just staring at her apartment for hours. He never came to her door again, but he didn't have to. His presence was a silent, constant threat. She was a prisoner in her own home. Unable to live with the fear, Alicia broke her lease. It cost her almost $2,000, but she considered it a small price to pay for her life. She moved out a week later and never looked back. The man faced zero consequences, and to this day, Alicia is left wondering what he really wanted. Sometimes, the horror that moves into a new house with you isn't something you can report to the police. It's a silent dread that settles in the corners and waits for you to turn out the lights. This is what a family found when they moved into what looked like a perfectly normal suburban house. For the two teenagers, 16-year-old Maya and 18-year-old Liam, it was an adventure. They each got a bigger room, and the house had a historic charm they liked. But that history came with baggage. It started with sounds, faint whispers that seemed to snake through the air vents at night. Liam would be reading in bed and hear what sounded exactly like his sister Maya calling his name. But when he'd go check, she'd be sound asleep. A few nights later, Maya felt something even weirder. As she was dozing off, she felt a clear pressure on the edge of her bed, like someone had just sat down next to her. Her eyes flew open, but the room was empty. The indentation, though, felt real, and it was cold. They tried to explain it all away. The whispers were just the old house settling. The pressure on the bed was a muscle spasm or a half-dream. They were just getting used to the place, but they both knew, deep down, something was off. The feeling in the house was changing. The air got heavy after dark, and they started avoiding certain hallways at night without even knowing why. But then came the night that shattered every excuse they had. Liam woke up suddenly from a deep sleep for no reason. His room was almost pitch black, except for the glow of a streetlight outside. He glanced across the hall to his sister's room. She always left her door cracked open. And that's when he saw it. Standing over Maya's bed was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, and made of pure, featureless shadow. It wasn't just a patch of darkness. It was a void in the shape of a person. It stood perfectly still, its head tilted down, as if it were studying his sleeping sister. Liam's breath caught in his throat. A raw, primal fear seized him, and he couldn't move. He tried to scream for Maya, but no sound came out. For what felt like an hour, the shadow just stood there. Then slowly, as if it knew it was being watched, its head turned. It had no face, no eyes, but Liam felt its gaze lock onto him. The feeling was pure, ancient evil. In that moment, he was certain he was about to die. But just as quickly, the figure seemed to dissolve, melting back into the shadows of the room until it was gone. The second it vanished, Liam could move again. He gasped for air, scrambled out of bed, and burst into Maya's room, flicking on the light. She woke with a start, terrified by his panic. He told her everything, the words tumbling out. She believed him instantly. The whispers, the feeling of being watched, the pressure on her bed, it all snapped into place. They weren't imagining things. They told their parents the next morning. And while their parents were skeptical, they couldn't ignore the real terror in their kids' eyes. After that night, the activity ramped up. They'd catch glimpses of shadowy figures in their peripheral vision. Their security cameras would capture strange orbs of light floating down the halls. The family eventually brought in paranormal investigators who confirmed the house had a powerful, residual energy. The siblings were right. They weren't alone in their new home, and whatever was with them had been watching from the start. Our next story is a classic piece of internet folklore. It's a chilling urban legend that has been shared across countless forums and late-night conversations. While it's often presented as a true story or a documented police oddity, there's no verifiable evidence it ever really happened. But that doesn't make the tale any less terrifying. The legend begins with a horrific crime at a house on Maple Street, where a woman named Margaret Henderson was murdered by her husband. He was sent to prison, and life, for everyone else, moved on. The house was cleaned up and eventually sold. 3 years passed, A new family, knowing nothing of the house's dark past, moved in. Then, the calls started. The local 911 dispatch center began getting calls from an untraceable number. They always came in the dead of night, between 2 and 3 a.m. On the line was a woman's voice, faint and full of static, but just clear enough. "Help me," she'd whisper, "he's hurting me." She always gave her name as Margaret Henderson and her address as 1879 Maple Street. Every time, police were sent to the house, and every time they found the new family sleeping safely, totally unaware of the ghostly emergency calls being made in their name. The officers would apologize and leave, confused. At first, everyone assumed it was a cruel prank. Police tried to trace the calls, but they led nowhere, simply vanishing into thin air. The story takes a terrifying turn during one specific call. The dispatcher heard the same faint, panicked voice of Margaret. But this time, after her plea for help, there was a new sound, the sickening rhythmic thud of an axe splitting wood. It was followed by a choked scream, and then silence. The sounds were so real that the dispatcher, thinking it was a live assault, sent 2 cars speeding to the scene. When officers arrived, the family was once again perfectly fine. On edge, the officers did a full sweep of the house with the homeowner's permission. Everything was normal until they got to the master bedroom, the exact room where the murder had happened years before. There, on the solid wood of the bedroom door, were 3 fresh, deep gashes. The marks in the wood were raw and splintered, looking like they'd been made by a heavy blade. They were a perfect match for the crime scene photos from Margaret Henderson's murder. The homeowners swore the marks weren't there when they went to sleep. This is where the story cements itself as a legend. The thoroughly spooked police reportedly put the house under quiet surveillance. The calls kept coming, and so did the strange events. During another call, the exact same audio of the axe sounds was recorded, identical down to the microsecond. When officers checked the house, a new 4th gash had appeared on the door. It was as if the house itself was a recording, and the past was bleeding into the present. The legend has no clean ending. It remains an unsolved mystery. A ghost in the machine, replaying a life's horrific final moments, leaving you to wonder, can a memory get stuck on a loop and echo through time? Some houses don't just have histories, they have folklore. Our 4th story is a take on a classic ghost archetype, the Lady in Red. Spirits like her are part of local legends all over the country, often tied to grand old houses with tragic histories. This version is about a young artist named Julian, who was so drawn to a Victorian house's Gothic style that he decided to rent the top-floor apartment. He saw it as a place of inspiration. He soon learned its character ran much deeper and darker than he ever imagined. The strange things were small at first. There was a persistent cold spot in the main hallway that never warmed up. He'd occasionally feel a light touch on his shoulder, only to spin around and find no one there. He started noticing odd things in the reflections in the house's antique mirrors. For a split second, the room in the glass wouldn't be his. It would be the same space, but with older furniture, as if he were catching a glimpse of the house a century ago. He was an artist. He figured a weird house was part of the deal, good for inspiration. But the house wasn't satisfied with subtle hints. One evening, Julian was walking from his studio to the kitchen. He stepped out onto the upstairs landing and froze. Standing at the far end of the long, dim hallway was a woman. She was tall, dressed in an old-fashioned, floor-length gown of deep red and black. She wore a wide-brimmed hat tilted down, hiding her face completely in shadow. She was perfectly, unnervingly still. Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. He couldn't see her face, but he felt with total certainty that she was looking right at him. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cracking. "Can I help you?" The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, a silent silhouette of dread. Julian took a single, hesitant step forward, and in the time it took him to blink, she was gone. She didn't run or fade. She was there, and then she wasn't. The encounter left him deeply shaken. The next day, he cautiously asked his elderly downstairs neighbor about any stories tied to the house. The neighbor just nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. He told Julian the local legend of the Lady in Red, a spirit said to wander the upstairs halls. No one knew who she was, but sightings had been reported for decades. She appears, stands silently, and then vanishes. For Julian, the local legend was now terrifyingly real. After that night, he saw her more often. He'd catch her reflection in a mirror, or see her standing in a doorway from the corner of his eye, always in red and black, her face always hidden. He never felt threatened, but he never felt alone either. The constant presence wore him down. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. He didn't move out, but he closed off the main hallway where she appeared most often, turning that whole section of his apartment into a storage space. He created a physical barrier between himself and the house's oldest resident, becoming the newest chapter in the legend of the Lady in Red. Our final story takes us to a place where history and horror are inseparable. Old Bryce Hospital in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, is a real abandoned psychiatric facility with a deeply troubled past of patient mistreatment. Its decaying buildings have become a hotspot for urban explorers and ghost hunters, drawn by legends of the suffering trapped within its walls. This is an anecdotal account from two such explorers, a couple who got far more than they bargained for. Armed with flashlights and a camera, they slipped onto the asylum grounds at night. The moment they stepped inside the main building, they felt a crushing weight of sorrow and dread. The air was thick and cold. The silence was absolute, but it felt loud, like the aftershock of 1,000 faded screams. They started exploring the derelict wards. Almost immediately, they heard shuffling feet on the floor above them, even though they knew they were alone. Faint, disembodied whispers seemed to drift out of empty patient rooms. While this specific encounter is just one of many unverified stories, it fits a pattern of terrifying experiences reported by those who dare to enter. They made their way to a wing known for housing the most violent patients. Here, the sorrow was replaced by a palpable anger. As they stood in a long, dark corridor, the woman, let's call her Sarah, felt a sudden, sharp, burning pain across her back. It was so intense she cried out. Her partner, Mark, whipped his flashlight around to her. He asked what was wrong, and she said it felt like she'd been burned. He told her to turn around. As he lifted the back of her shirt, he gasped. There, on her skin, were 3 long, bright red scratches. They were perfectly parallel and inflamed, as if a hand with sharp nails had reached out of the darkness and clawed her. There was nothing she could have scraped against. The marks looked undeniably like they came from a hand. Just as they were processing this, a loud bang erupted from a room down the hall, like a heavy door slamming shut. That was it. They were done. Pure terror took over, and they fled, stumbling through the dark halls, not daring to look back until they burst out into the night air. Back in their car, the reality of what happened began to sink in. The scratches on Sarah's back were real, physical proof of their encounter. Countless visitors to Old Bryce have reported being pushed, scratched, and hearing voices. And while these claims can't be officially verified, the sheer volume of stories has cemented its reputation as one of the most haunted places in the country. It's a grim reminder that some places are so soaked in pain, the past doesn't just leave an echo, it leaves a scar. We like to think we're safe in our own homes. We lock our doors to keep the dangers of the world out. But these stories show us that sometimes the most terrifying things are already inside, waiting in the shadows, in the static of a phone line, or baked into the history of the walls themselves. A new house might seem like a blank page, but you never truly know what was written on it before you got there. Thanks for watching. If you have your own scary story to share, you can submit it to the email in the description below. For more tales of true horror and the unexplained, be sure to like this video and subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you dare. Until next time, sleep well.